بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب زدني علما رب زدني علما رب زدني علما.
Tonight we begin the first class on what is Sufism, and these will be hopefully more than just elementary introductions about this phenomenon which is so important in our religion and our religious tradition. So we want to talk about what does that mean? Where does it come from? What is it and what is it supposed to be? And this is an extremely important topic for all of us here, and in fact for Muslims in general. Is there any word in the Muslim lexicon today that is more stigmatized than Sufism? It's a word that we often cannot use in many contexts. And this is in fact one of the biggest problems that we face, because Sufism is at the very core of what Islam has always been about. And we want to talk about this objectively, and we want to talk about this comprehensively as much as is possible. And we also want to talk about why the word and concept Sufism is so stigmatized today, because that's very, very important. Why? How did that happen? And so, inshallah, this will be a class. It's not academic, but I do hope it to be sound, and I hope it to be thorough. And therefore, I ask your permission to use my computer and not to try to speak from memory or from inspiration, because there are a lot of points that I want to cover, and therefore I like to organize them on the computer and read from the computer, although that's often very, very unpleasant for many people today. And that's because we live in the culture of television and YouTube and social media and entertainment. And so therefore the spoken word as written word being read is very difficult for many people to accept. So what is Sufism? And where does it come from? And inshallah we'll have 5 lectures. They are relatively long. I hope that won't tire you. And we will try to have questions at the end of them, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And I'll try not to repeat myself, so please try to come to all the classes, and we will try to start on time. Tonight we were a little bit delayed because of problems with the reception and the online transmission of the lesson. But here we begin with one of the most important of all hadith, which I'm sure everybody here is familiar with, and this is Sunnah, Hadith, the foundation of the hadith, the foundation of the Sunnah. We have a hadith like that, just as we have Kitab, which is Al-Fatiha. And Sunnah is the famous hadith of Gabriel. And it comes at the very end of the prophetic legacy. It's right towards the end. Some scholars have said that it was just before Hijjatul Wida'. It was just before the farewell pilgrimage. That would be in the year 10, which was the final year of the Blessed Prophet's mission, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And therefore this hadith comes right before the cutting off of the revelation that was coming to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's a closing chapter, although it's like Fatiha, which is an opener, but it's a closing chapter. And in it, our scholars believe all the hadith and all the sunnah are embodied. Al-Qadi Iyad, he says that all of the knowledges of the Sharia, they go back to this hadith. So it is an important place to begin. And it is totally authoritative. Not only is it authentic, but it is mutawatir, or very close to that. It is multiply transmitted. So it's one of the most authentic of all the reports that we have from the Blessed Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Mullah Ali al-Qari, Allah be pleased with him, he says that Hadith Gabriel is called Hadith because it includes the Sharia, the Tariqah, and the Haqiqah. It has all of these in it. And then it says it also has a Bayan Ijmali. It has a comprehensive exposition of the faith like Surah Al-Fatiha does of the Qur'an. One of the things we'll see in this hadith is that Ihsan, moral perfection, the doing of goodness in the best way, this is the epitome of the religion. The hadith will indicate that to us, that it is the pinnacle of the religion. That Ihsan then is the interior realization of Islam and Iman. Islam and Iman, as spoken of in this hadith, they come together in Ihsan. They are realized in Ihsan and in selfless exterior service to God and to creation with honest and correct interior belief in Him. And Sufism is divine service in this fullest sense, as we will see, that includes Islam and Iman and is the science of Ihsan. In fact, some people have called Ihsan perfect divine service. I don't use that myself, but it's a very nice expression. And if we wanted to link this blessed hadith, al-Hadith, Hadith Gabriel, with the Qur'an, then perhaps we could do that by linking it with the beautiful verse number 3 of Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th surah. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. One of the greatest of all the gifts that God has given us in His book. This verse also is very late, and although the commentators disagree about when it was revealed, they disagree in a way very similar to the way they talk about Hadith Gabriel, that this was something around the time of Al-Hudaybiyah, the armistice, or maybe Hijjatul Wida', but it's right there at that end period as well. This day, God says, I have perfected for you your religion, deen. Now, Hadith Gabriel is going to say, what is deen? What is religion? But now it is fulfilled. Now the message has been delivered. This day have I perfected for you your religion and fulfilled my blessing upon you and contented myself with Islam for you as a religion. Again, this comes very late, and the two go together. Now, let's take a look at the Hadith Gabriel, which I know that there's probably no one here who doesn't know it, and many of you know it much better than I do. But we will take one of the riwayas of it, which is that of Ibn Umar, or of Umar, through his son Ibn Umar. And it's really beautiful to actually study this hadith more comprehensively by putting together the different transmissions of it, because they add things which are remarkable, that make the picture really clear. But in this hadith, we'll say it in English, we don't have that much time. It would be really good to say it in Arabic, and Arabic has that right over us, but we'll rely on English, if you permit me, as much as possible. So Umar transmits in this hadith, while we were in the presence of God's messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a certain day, suddenly there appeared to us a man with intensely white garments and intensely black hair. No sign of travel could be seen on him, and no one among us knew him, or we could say recognized him. He came forward until he sat just in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and placed his knees against those of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and placed the palms of his hands on his thighs. Some will say that he placed them on his own thighs, but others say that he placed them on the Prophet's thighs. And this is a report that we understand in the light of Arabian culture, because this is a particular way of approaching a Sayyid, a lord of the tribe, or in this case a teacher, and it indicates that you have great need and urgency in what you are saying. And also it's been taken as an embodiment of the way that the relation of the student to the teacher should be, in all respect, and also with this kind of deference for the teacher. And then this beautiful man said, and of course already even in the wording of this hadith, you see that this is strange, isn't it? Because we call Medina a city, but today we would probably call it a village, because it wasn't as big as Cairo or Beirut or these other cities that we have in the world today. In fact, a big city at that time would be a city that had 1 million people, and there were very few of those. And Al-Medina is really a cluster of oases that are walled, and of fortresses that are walled. But the people of Medina all knew each other, and they knew who was among them and who was not. And they knew who were the guests who came to the city. And however you came to Medina, you had to come through arduous travel, on camelback, on donkey back, mule, and other walking, and you would be dirty, covered with dust, thirsty, and there would be other signs of travel on you, probably exhaustion. And yet this man comes radiant and beautiful, and there's no sign of travel on him, and none of them know him. So who is this? Where did he come from? If we took the other transmissions of the hadith, they bring this out very clearly. That in fact the Sahaba wondered among themselves, that who is this? What is this? So then this beautiful man, he comes up to the Prophet, and we learn from other transmissions of the hadith that at that time, this is the very end of that beautiful dispensation of the coming of the Blessed Prophet, that the Sahaba had built a dukkan for the Prophet. Of course, the word that we think of is a store, but dukkan doesn't mean that here. Dukkan means a platform, and probably the original dukkans, dakakin, were platforms where a merchant would put his or her goods. But they built a platform for the Prophet so that he will stand out somewhat from the crowd, because now many people are coming to visit him. So they have this platform, maybe it's about this high, I don't know, and it's made from clay bricks. So he's sitting there, and in some of the transmissions they talk about the dukkan, the platform, and that Jibreel actually doesn't come up to the platform at first, he sits at a distance, and he says, adnu, and the Prophet would say, udnu. Do I come closer? He would say, come closer. Do I come closer? One even, adnu aw tadnu. Do I come closer or you? And then he comes closer, and then he comes on the platform, and he sits right up in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So all of them see this also. It's on a platform. All of them can see this. And then this beautiful man, he says, Muhammad, tell me about Islam. And God's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Islam is that you bear witness that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God, first pillar. That you establish the daily prayer, second pillar. Pay the obligatory charity fully, third pillar. Fast Ramadan, fourth pillar. And make pilgrimage to the house of God, if you are able and find a way to it, fifth pillar. He said, you have spoken the truth, sadaqat. So how strange, how absolutely amazing. You have spoken the truth. So Umar says, we were amazed at him asking the Prophet and then stating that he had spoken the truth. This is unusual. Then he said, tell me about Iman. The messenger said, that you believe in God. This is the first fundamental of faith. His angels, second. His books, third. His messengers, fourth. The last day, and that you believe in qadr, the measuring or the pre-measuring or the predestination of things by the will of God. Qadr, that of it which is good and that of it which is evil. He said, you have spoken the truth. So again, it's amazing. And then he says, so tell me about Ihsan. And the messenger said, that you worship God as if you could see Him. For even if you do not see Him, He surely sees you. This is Ihsan. And so then he said, so tell me about the hour of the coming of the last day. The messenger said, the one who is asked is not more knowledgeable about this than the one asking. Then he said, so tell me about its sign, or signs, but in this transmission it's sign. The messenger said that the maiden, the amma, slave girl, or the maiden, it could also be a young girl, give birth to her mistress. In another transmission, that she give birth to her Lord, her master. And that you see the barefoot, naked, and needy herdsmen of sheep vying with each other in building tall buildings. Then he went away, and I, this is of course Umar, the narrator, remained for a long time, not knowing who this was. Then one day the Prophet said, Umar, do you know who the person was asking the questions? I replied, God and His Messenger know best. The Prophet said, it was Gabriel, who came to you, we can say to all of you, to teach you your religion. This is the transmission of Muslim. This is an extremely important hadith. In it we see that Islam has three fundamental elements, that the deen has three fundamental elements. Islam, which is the 5 pillars, and then we know from other hadith that those 5 pillars are the props that support all of the law. So it's the outward law, the ahkam, what we do, what we don't do, how we dress, how we eat, how we live with each other, the things we perform, acts of worship and so forth. And Iman, and we have the 6 articles of faith, but of course there are many others. So we have sciences for that. And then Ihsan. So these are the 3 elements of the deen. Now, some scholars say that this hadith indicates that there are 4 elements. And they say that the signs of the end of time constitute a 4th element. Other scholars say that they constitute part of the 2nd element because they're part of Iman. And we won't get into that discussion. But of course they are very important, otherwise Jibreel wouldn't have asked about them. And they are a very important topic, although they're not the topic that we intend to speak about here. So here we see in this hadith that Islam, Iman, and Ihsan are all essential to the constitution of this deen. And not only that, but we can see here, as I said, that Ihsan is the highest level of these. It is the epitome of these. It is the fullest embodiment of these. And these 3 elements need to be harmoniously integrated with each other for the deen to be what it's supposed to be. And they should be integrated into our personalities as well. They should be, all of them, real for us in every way. So, again, we see from this that Ihsan can rightfully be called, the purpose of it all, and the lifeblood of this faith. It's extremely important.